I am the single mother to an obnoxiously adorable 7-year-old boy. This happened when he was 5 years old in the summer of 2018, and the what-ifs still haunt me. There is a beautiful park on the river that my son and I used to frequent. On this summer evening, we decided to picnic in the park for dinner. When we arrived, there were lots of families playing with their children on the playground. We found a spot in the grass near the water, laid down our big purple blanket, and began to eat. I was facing the playground, just people watching, when I noticed a group of 3 children that seemed to be alone. There were 2 boys and 1 girl, and they looked to be between the ages of 9 and 12. You know that bad feeling you get when something just doesn't feel right? These kids gave me that feeling almost instantly. I brushed it off because, well, they were only kids. My son and I were almost done eating and ready to play when some dark clouds came rolling in. We live in Florida, and this is standard for a summer evening, so I decided to wait it out and see if it would pass. It did. Everyone cleared the park with the exception of the group of children that I mentioned before. It was at this point that I realized they were definitely alone. I figured they must live nearby. I took my son on the swing, and these kids were just sort of hanging around near us and staring, but not saying anything. Then, the youngest looking boy came up to my son on the swing and stood in front of it so that my son almost hit him while he was swinging. He just stood there. I asked him what he was doing, and he did not answer. It made me super uneasy, so I took my son off the swing and over to the jungle gym on the other side of the playground. My son and I were playing on the other side of the park, and I did not see the other kids anymore, so I thought they must have left. I sat down on a bench near the jungle gym and watched my son as he played. About 10 minutes later, I looked over toward the parking lot and noticed that same group of kids were actually still at the park and were over there talking to an older man with a dog. This went on for another 5 or so minutes, and then the man and children parted ways. The man walked down the street in the opposite direction, and the children came back to the park and over to the jungle gym where my son was playing. I was still sitting on the bench, which was probably about 10 feet away from the jungle gym, when those kids started hanging around and talking to my son. They were asking him lots of questions, like how old are you and where do you go to school? He was answering while climbing around and didn't seem to be paying a whole lot of attention. I was watching the other kids the entire time this was going on because they just gave me an unwavering bad feeling. And after a few minutes, they got off the jungle gym and began walking toward the road. I was so fixated on the top of their heads as they were walking away that I didn't realize my son, who was tiny, was walking with them. They were almost to the street when I screamed my son's name and he turned around and bolted back to me. I asked him where he was going and he said they had to show me something. We left immediately. I really don't know if it was sinister or not, but I can't explain the kids trying to lead my son out of the park, and I often think about what could have happened if I wasn't paying attention. Was the old man somehow involved? I spoke with my son about following this stranger danger rule with anyone he doesn't know, even if they are kids like him. We don't play at that park anymore. I drive by that park on occasion, and I've seen that old man a few times, but haven't seen those children.
First time living alone in my apartment. I was walking out to my car in heels to attend an evening church service. I hear this guy saying, "Hey, hello, can you help me?" I'm standing about 10 feet away, and when I stop to observe him, it's this man in a wheelchair. He has 1 sack of groceries in his lap and 2 on the ground beside him. He had on what looked like veteran attire and combat boots. But what stood out to me most is I noticed how incredibly built, buff he was. Not just his arms, but his calves. The hairs on my arms and neck instantly stood up. I guess while silently observing him, he was waiting for me to walk up to him. I took a few steps back and shook my head. His immediate response was, "I'm not going to do anything. Can't you see I'm in a wheelchair?" He then just pointed to his door and said, "Look, I just need help putting the bags inside my door on the floor. That's all." I declined politely and began to walk away. The screaming, cursing, and insults was what made me basically run to my car. Safe in my car with the doors locked, I couldn't shake that awful feeling off me. Fast forward a couple of days later, as I'm driving down the street, headed home. Who do I see walking, without a limp, or a cane, or any visible disability? My heart dropped. I stayed in my apartment for a week, too scared to go out in case of any more encounters. To this day, this strange encounter still haunts me. Edit. I did not call the police. To be honest, I was sort of in shock. When I made it to the church, the pastor made sure some guys followed me back home afterwards, and he called the apartment office to report the incident for me. Second edit. This happened a few years back. I was in a total state of shock. I'm sorry if I didn't react perhaps the way that you would have. Please don't tell me it's my fault if it happened to someone else. I did what I thought to do, and that was report it to the management. Sorry it never occurred to me to call the police. I definitely should have.
This happened about 10 years ago while I was in my last year of college. My friend and I were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a very safe, slightly upscale part of town. To give you an image of us, at the time I was about 210 pounds, 5'7", and fairly capable of handling myself, as I had been an athlete for a large portion of my life, but had succumbed to food addiction. My roommate was 5'3", 150 pounds, and had never lifted weights in her life. One day I was cooking up something for dinner, and my roommate came in and went to her room. We weren't lovey-dovey kind of roommates, so it wasn't unusual for us to not make small talk every time we saw each other. I went on cooking, and about 5 minutes later there was a knock on the door. I went around the island and opened the door, expecting a delivery person. Instead, I was gripped with this intense, visceral sense of unease. It wrapped around my body like a vice, and every hair on my body stood up. There was a normal-looking guy standing there, medium height, light skin, brown hair, wearing a ball cap, casual sweater, and pants. To this day, I couldn't identify him from a lineup, but I just recall he looked totally unremarkable. However, I had never in my life felt such a sense of foreboding. My heart was beating out of my chest. I didn't even say a word. I just stared at him, vaguely wondering if I should shut the door in his face. He stared at me for a few moments and turned and walked away, his dog following behind him. I had been so fixated on this guy, I hadn't even realized he had been holding a dog leash attached to a sweet-looking golden retriever. My anxiety abated, and I decided I had been overreacting, despite never having that particular feeling before. I had grown up as a tomboy, had mostly guy friends growing up, was in a hugely male-dominated career and degree, computer science IT, and played a male-dominated sport most of my life, golf. I was not, and have never been, in the least, afraid of men. About 30 minutes later, my roommate came out and asked me who was at the door, and I said, "Oh, just some random guy, wrong apartment, apparently." She looked at me frowning and asked, "Did he have a dog?" I replied affirmative. He had a dog. She told me that some guy with a dog had tried to chat her up at the mailboxes on the other side of the complex, but she ignored him and got back in her car to come here. She's positive he couldn't have seen her come into this apartment because 1, he would have had to run at super speed to catch up to her. 2, our apartment faces away from the section where the mailboxes are. 3, there are at least 4 buildings obscuring line of sight to our building. What that means is he scoured the parking lots for her car, and when he saw her car parked in front of our apartment building, he had likely knocked on each door, there were 2 on each floor, 4 floors total, to try and find her. Our suspicions were confirmed the next day when there was a phone number, no name, under her windshield. I have no idea if she ever reported the incident, but I was on edge for a good month afterwards because I was worried he might keep an eye out for her. I don't know why he turned around and left. Maybe he thought he had the wrong apartment, or maybe he assumed she lived alone and didn't want to confront someone else. Maybe as much as my roommate's tiny size enticed him, my larger size made him think twice about doing anything. To this day, I've only ever gotten that sensation one other time while I was out with my boyfriend at a bar about a year ago. A guy who wasn't even looking at me made me feel super uneasy, and the same tension had wound through my body. Dude looked completely ordinary there as well, but my instincts were just lashing back at him. Considering the incident with the first guy, I knew to trust my instincts and asked to go to another bar. Maybe I have a sixth sense for crazy people, but I decided I would never question my subconscious instincts again. I hope to never experience that sensation in the future. I'm curious if anyone else has had that same sort of subconscious reaction to a person.
This happened last fall. A friend of mine and myself, 25 gals, went on a hike one day at a national park. We live by it, so we hike the trails a lot and we know the land pretty well, so we adventure off the trails a bit. On this day, it was kind of chilly. Good to know for the story, I guess. We went on a trail that starts at the end of the park and circles back to the parking lot. But we have a spot we like to chill at that's about halfway down the trail, but to get there you have to cross the river and continue walking down the river a bit. There's only one spot that's good for crossing where the water is only about knee-high. Everywhere else you pretty much have to swim. Well, on our way to our spot, still on the main trail, we passed this man that's walking back towards the park. I got weird vibes right off the bat. I'm a friendly person, and I don't just ignore people when they walk past me on trails, just to hi and comment on the beautiful day or whatnot. This man straight up stopped walking and was just trying to make conversation. His eyes kept looking me and my friend up and down, and was being super creepy. I pretty much told him we better keep on moving because we had things to do after our hike and needed to get it done, just so he'd get the idea that we couldn't stand there talking to him. We get to the spot to cross and continue our adventure to our hangout spot. We are just sitting there smoking and chilling. Then I see some movement downriver on the other side of the river. It's that freaking guy, and he's looking for us. I was sure of it. Now my friend is wearing some neon shit, so he spots us right away. Then he starts to cross the river. In the deep shit, too. It's freezing cold, and there would be no reason for him to cross that other than to try to get to us. I told my friend to pack the shit and let's haul ass out of here. I had never had a feeling like I had that day. Like we were in danger and that action needed to be done. I found this rock while I was getting our stuff and put it in the bag. It was about the size of a softball. One end was blunt and rough to where I could get a good grip on it. The sides came down to a point, but not to a point. I guess the best way to describe it would be a tool that you would use to take the hide off of an animal. Anyways, I was full and ready to do whatever I needed to do to save her and myself. And that rock would do some serious damage, if not kill this dude. I'm so happy it didn't come to that. We lost him because we cut through the woods and ran like hell to the conservation building up on the hill. Told the men about the man at the river. They gave us a ride back to the parking lot and waited till we left. I don't know if they found the dude or what, but that was one of the scariest moments of my life.